Welcome inside Gillette Stadium, everybody. My name is Mike Petraglia, joined as always by Patriots expert columnist for WEEI.com, Christopher Price. All right, Chris, it was indeed hat and t-shirt day here at Gillette Stadium. They were awarded to the Patriots players after a 41-13 win over the Miami Dolphins. You remember, Patriots were outscored 23-0 in the second half in week number 1 in that 33-20 loss that started the season. Well, the Patriots turned the tables. They outscored the Miami Dolphins 27-0 in the final 30 minutes here at Gillette Stadium Sunday afternoon. And as the t-shirts read after the game, the Patriots run the East. And yes, they do. But it was not an easy game by any stretch, especially the first 30 minutes.
Really, the second quarter was, particularly the end of the second quarter, was an unmitigated disaster for this team. As bad as they played at the end of the second quarter, they flipped it around 180 degrees and had a great third quarter. They got great defensive play. The Miami Dolphins ran one play in New England territory in the third quarter. They got some great offense, put up 3 touchdowns and a field goal. They got great special teams, got great field position. It all came together for New England in that third quarter. That provided the spark for this team to play well down the stretch.
All right, I tried to ask some of the players after the game if Bill Belichick perhaps read them the riot act. That's what a lot of people would assume. They did not play well in that second quarter especially. They looked flat for some reason, and you wondered if Belichick and company would read them the riot act, and the players said, no, not necessarily, but certainly in no uncertain terms, they were reminded that we did not play well in any phase of that game.
Yeah, and I think that it's an older team, it's a more veteran group, and I think maybe a younger team would have, it would have really suited them a little bit better if he had read them the riot act. I think this team, they're an older group of guys. They understood the magnitude of this game. They know what was at stake. It was a division clincher, like you said, a hat and a t-shirt game. I think that might have rung a little bit hollow. I think all players want is their coach to be consistent with them. And I think Belichick has been overall, he's been consistent in his approach. I think he was consistent today, particularly at halftime.
Well, certainly when Tom Brady struggled in that first half, and there's no mincing of words about it, he was not good in that first half. And we've seen that, and we saw it last week in San Diego where he just looked off his game. There was Jamie Collins making the big special teams play, blocking the Caleb Sturgis field goal attempt with his right hand, and the scoop and the score from Kyle Arrington, really setting the tone like the special teams has. And I know you talked to Matthew Slater after the game.
It's been huge for this team. Special teams, and I'll continue to say it, I was talking about it on the pregame show today, special teams is a difference maker for this group. It sets them apart. Particularly when you get into this stage of the year, you get into the postseason, every team is good. You're looking for every edge you can get. And the New England special teams unit is that kind of group that can ultimately act as a difference maker, as a separator. When you're talking about them going up against teams like Baltimore, and Denver, in the NFC, Green Bay, and Seattle, this is a group that can make a difference now and into the postseason. We saw it today.
What about the defense? We saw the return of Dante Hightower, a 1-week absence from a shoulder injury, but obviously the bigger story, Chandler Jones coming back from a 6-week absence due to a hip injury. How did you think they both looked?
I think they looked good in very limited action, not limited action, but in terms of what they were asked to do.
Well,
I think
early on,
exactly.
Chandler Jones was used in third down situations. Then he seemed, Belichick and company, Matt Patricia, seemed to work his way back in.
And I think it was interesting, though, that they were short on defensive ends coming into the game today because Zach Moore was a healthy scratch. And so I think he may have played a little bit more than maybe we thought he may have played initially if he was going to be active for this game. He was active, played more in the second half. It allowed them to do kind of a few different things when it came to their defensive front that we haven't seen over the last 6 or 7 weeks. We saw a couple of sets, and obviously a lot of it is situational football, but we saw a lot of sets where there were 2 down linemen. There was one guy, there was a couple of snaps where Ninkovich was the only guy with his hand in the dirt. So they switched things up, and they presented a lot of different looks to this Miami offense. I'm going to be interested to see how much of that carries forward. Again, a lot of it is purely situational football. Third down, passing situations, you're going to have situations like that. You're going to have lots of nickel defenses. But at the same time, I thought it really worked today. They looked very good in their return.
And in one situation, Chandler Jones, had his hand on the turf and then dropped back in coverage and laid out a hit, making a tackle on a run. It was good to see that because you want to know whether or not Chandler Jones is 100% ready to go for the playoffs.
You know what was interesting to me? The few looks that they had where they had Akeem Ayers and Chandler Jones on the same side, where Jones was a defensive tackle type, and you had Ayers out on the edge as kind of a defensive end / outside linebacker, whatever you want to call it, an end-of-the-line player. That really looked like it was able to get some good, consistent pressure on Tannehill. Now, I don't know how much of that is a banged-up Miami offensive line with more than a few soft spots on it, but it might be something to look for going forward.
And also, I thought Alan Branch had a tremendous first half. Probably had that. Matt Chatham, our own Matt Chatham, was talking about the fact that he had the best defensive push up the middle, and I have to agree that he looked very impressive. The most important part of that, it gives depth and gives some rest to Vince Wilfork if you need to give it to him.
Exactly. The other thing, too, you don't need Dominique Easley at this point. It'd be nice to have him, and I think it'd be nice to have him if you're a Patriots fan for depth up there. But you look at the guys that they can run out there at the defensive tackle position, guys who can play multiple spots. You look at the guys now with Jones back, you look at the guys at the defensive end spot. You don't necessarily need him in this situation. Right. If it was a different situation, maybe if it was last year where you didn't have Wilfork, didn't have Tommy Kelly, you had a lot of guys banged up, you would have to press him into service. You don't necessarily need to press him into service this year if you don't think he's healthy enough to go.
Back to special teams for a moment. We had the chance, both of us, to be in on the scrum with Stephen Gostkowski. He set a pretty significant franchise record tonight, 1,160 points, and he becomes the all-time franchise leader in scoring, passing Adam Vinatieri. Your thoughts?
Vinatieri did it in 10 years. Gostkowski did it in 9. I thought that was interesting to hit that milestone. I think we tend to underrate Gostkowski a little bit just because he is not Adam Vinatieri. But there is a reason that Stephen Gostkowski is a Pro Bowler. There's a reason that he's considered one of the better young kickers, not young kickers, but one of the better kickers in the league. He's developed a resume. He's developed a pattern of success here in New England that maybe is only matched by Vinatieri. He hasn't had the postseason opportunities that Vinatieri has, and that's the only other thing that he needs, I think, on that resume to check off to measure him against a guy like Adam Vinatieri.
All right, I asked Gostkowski what was going through his mind, because I thought that was the shortest standing ovation ever. He didn't have much time to savor in the appreciation from the Gillette Stadium fans, and when he lined up to kick off, all he kept telling himself was, don't screw up the kick, don't screw up the kick. As a matter of fact, he kicked it out of bounds, kicked it through the end zone, touchback, no problem there. He muffed a kick, he told us, later in the game. Yeah. And that's the kind of guy Stephen Gostkowski is. He's very unguarded about himself, lets his guard down, and really is a humble guy.
You know what was really interesting, talking to Matthew Slater, kind of piggybacking on that special teams talk, talking to Slater in saying that we really don't give enough love to the special teams coaches. Scotty O'Brien, Joe Judge, the assistant coach, said they're not the geniuses that dial up all these intricate defenses. They're not the geniuses that that get Tom and Gronk and the rest of that offense to 4,000, 5,000 yard passing season. But they are just as important to the success of this team when they go about the way they go about their business. It's really important. When you look at this New England special teams unit, again, I can't stress this enough, they're a difference maker. They're the kind of group that can take this team from here to here in the postseason.
Very quickly on the offense, Rob Gronkowski told me after the game, just a Charlie horse on that hit late in the fourth quarter, or third quarter, when the Patriots were really putting together those drives, those 24 points that we mentioned earlier. He was lucky. He spoke to Robert Kraft about this after the game. He said, no, don't worry, Mr. Kraft. It was only a Charlie horse. Gronk told me that. Same thing later on. Patriots escaped a scare there, but Gronk and Brady really set the tone coming out of the chute in the second half.
They really did. And this is a team in Miami that really did a good job over the course of the last 3, 4, 5 years containing Rob Gronkowski. His per-game averages against the Dolphins were some of the worst, the lowest, when you stack it up against the rest of the league. The Dolphins were also coming into this game I think they were the second best team in the league when it came to shutting down tight ends. Gronkowski has 3 catches, 96 yards, and a touchdown. That's a good performance against a pretty good Miami defense, again, when it comes to slowing down tight ends.
Also in that locker room, a really nice moment, Chris, between Drew Bledsoe and Tom Brady. They spoke for about 5 minutes and chatted about how each other's family's doing and what they're doing. Obviously, Tom Brady's a little bit busy trying to get the football team here in New England back to the Super Bowl, but Drew Bledsoe and Tom Brady had a nice moment. I want to go back to something else. I know you're writing about the trash talking the Miami Dolphins did after game number 1 when they won 33-20 and they were a gigantic 1-0 on the season. Your thoughts on how that really motivated the Patriots?
Yeah, a couple of guys in the locker room acknowledged that there was a bit of an edge there because Miami may or may not have said something that offended them. Now, we know this franchise is famous for taking any sort of slight, either real or perceived, and using it down the road, remembering it, cataloging it, and using it down the road. That appeared to be the case this time. Devin McCourty, Matthew Slater, Darrelle Revis all talked in the locker room about Yeah, it meant something to give a little bit
Right.
back to Miami, given the circumstances, given the fact that they could knock them out of the postseason. Not only knock them out of the postseason, but also win the division in the process.
All right, certainly the missions are far from accomplished here at Gillette Stadium. Next week, the New York Jets down in the Meadowlands, and then that's followed up by the season finale, home finale against the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, with the Denver Broncos right there with the Patriots atop the AFC East, they want home field advantage. They do not want to repeat of last year when they had home divisional game here and then had to travel to Sports Authority Field at Mile High in Denver and play the AFC Championship game. If it gets that far, they obviously want the game here. Again, the final here at Gillette Stadium, another hat and t-shirt day. The Patriots wrap up their 6th straight AFC Eastern Division title with a 41-13 win over the Miami Dolphins. He's Christopher Price. I'm Mike Petraglia, WEEI.com.